Well, good afternoon, everybody. And well, it's a microphone for some people who are really super close. But good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Soul Food Books. Hi, May. So today hi, Maisie. I'm really excited to be able to bring a couple of authors to our stage who have focused on young adult literature. One of the things that I'm also really excited about is these are two of my favorite people. Catherine is this incredible author who works with kids in writing and being able to bring out that potential in all children. And Ed is somebody who I've gotten an opportunity to know for a very long time and has made me laugh since I was quite young. And just an incredible writer and somebody who I've gotten to see grow as a writer also. So tonight we're going to be doing short readings for both of the books, Cameron and the Girls with Mr. Edward Averitt, and then The Summer of No Regrets with Miss Catherine Grace Bond. And I believe we're going to start with Catherine today. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to these authors, and then afterwards our goal is since we are a community spot and we're not necessarily a traditional bookstore, our goal is to be interactive with everybody and get people to be able to ask questions. And there's something really magical when somebody writes a book or sings a song or writes a poem, and you get the opportunity to connect in with them and say, what was that inspiration? And these are the things that I'm thinking, and get that reflection back and be a part of this beautiful mythology that is being put out there. So that is our second part. So thank you so much for coming today. And Ms. Catherine Grace.
Hi. I'm really glad to be here. And I've been writing for young people for a long time, writing for younger children before now, but there was always kind of a YA book on the back burner because I love teenagers. I've worked with teenagers since I was one. I actually started a youth group for my little brother when I was a junior in high school because I thought he needed a youth group. So my husband and I have been doing work with teens for a really long time, and now we run a program called Teen Write and another one called Epic Write that's nonprofit, and we take kids outdoors to do live action role playing, and then they follow the hero's journey in this gigantic live action role playing game and write about what they've done. They stop at every interval and they write, and then in the end they have a story, and they are all in each other's stories, and it's really hilarious and sometimes very poignant, and it builds community, and that's what I love. So I also write for teenagers, and this is actually my debut novel. It's my, I don't know, fifth or sixth book, but it's my debut novel, The Summer of No Regrets. What's funny about this book is that it does have a romance in it. Most definitely has a romance in it. And the publisher decided to market only the romance. So this is the second summer of this book, and I am referring to this as the Summer of No Regrets Unexpected Tour, because the thing that was most said about this book was, wow, I didn't expect that. Because they thought they were reading a beach romance. And, we've got some beach and we've got some romance. It's there. But really, it's kind of about a girl who is 16 years old and is trying to find the meaning of life by asking the important question, is the boy next door a movie star in hiding? So, but she really already is searching. She's trying to find... she's had a big loss. The person that knew her the best is gone, and that was her grandmother. And there was this huge religious war between her grandmother and her dad. Dad was an atheist, mom was a conservative Christian. And so Brigida was sort of raised in these two worlds, and mom talks to fairies. So we sort of have, kind of all angles of this. And so Dad and Nani, her grandma, never really reconciled before the end. And so Dad, after both his parents die within about 3 months, decides to become a shaman. So now Dad has gone from atheist to shaman, and Brigida wants a religion of her own. And they live in this big retreat center out in the woods, and every weekend there's a new spiritual group coming through. So she's interviewing all of them. So when the Buddhist poets come, she's trying to find out about Buddhism. When the Jewish environmentalists come, she wants to know about Judaism, and maybe she wants to be Jewish. So they're There's this whole thread running through the book about spirituality and trying to find truth. And really maybe for her, trying to find her grandmother. You know, she is gone. What happened to her? So all of those big life and death questions that teenagers begin asking. I wonder if that van could be turned a different direction. Although the windswept look is kind of dramatic. So the book kind of has all of this stuff, and so I've been hoping this summer that we can talk about some of those more thoughtful aspects of the book and the questions that teens ask, but also not miss out on some of the humor, because that's one of my most favorite things to do, is just find the humor in some situations. So we open with Brigida's best friend, Natalie, and they're in the Burger Arcade in the tiny town of Quanisum, which is modeled after Duval, but is quite a bit smaller. And so here are Brigida and Natalie. "Touch him," Natalie whispered. "Go put your hands on his shoulders." I slid my chair back into the shadows of Earl's Country Burger Arcade. "Are you kidding?" "No, I'm not kidding, Brigida. Boys love it when you touch them. Don't you want him back?" Devon sat by himself playing Darkstalkers. A curl of hair fell across his cheek, and he brushed it back, revealing a constellation of freckles. "I don't do massages," I hissed, "and I didn't come here for Devon." It hurt to look at him. Devon, who made raspberry sandwiches for me when we were 5. Devon, who knew our 20 acres better than Natalie. Devon, who won us the homeschool science fair prize in 3rd grade for our project on animal scat. It is what you're thinking. Devon, the first friend I let in our treehouse, even though my sister Mallory said girls only. Devon, who started putting his arm around me last summer and saying things like, "I'd rather be with you than anyone." Devon, who now found Jasmina of the Night in his stupid sci-fi fantasy forum more interesting than me. It was Natalie's craving for French fries that had brought us into charming downtown Quanisum. That's Quanisum, rustic Washington hamlet, population 1,054. It was supposed to be a blissful stroll through the shelves of the dusty cover new and used. Just books, quiet and reliable. No drama, no friends who betray you, no Devon. His wiry arms flexed as he punched the buttons, concentrating the way he used to when he was helping me with a physics problem. I missed that. Natalie didn't need to know how much. The arcade was crowded. It was midsummer hot, and we were blockaded by sweaty, gaming bodies. The bottom book in my stack stuck to the table. Natalie's pile of romances was topped by Makeup Secrets, 20 Strokes to a Great New You. She'd been giving it a try in the restroom, so now her L'Oreal smoldering dark auburn curls were caught up in a silver barrette, and she'd added extra glam liner to her eyes. I am the complete opposite of Natalie. Hair, longish, blondish, straightish. Eyes, non-glam. Goal, to find the meaning of life. Natalie wants to ditch this two-cow town and make it big in L.A., honest to God. But she was my best friend from the time we believed our Barbies came to life at night, and if I still have a best friend, I guess it would be her. By the way, Natalie sneaked a peek toward the food counter. That new guy they have scooping ice cream? Josh Hutcherson. On the other hand, maybe she still believed dolls came to life. It would be at least as weird as her sightings. Natalie spotted celebrity lookalikes everywhere. Nick Jonas making lattes at Starbucks. Taylor Lautner taking tickets at the Space Needle. Why would Josh Hutcherson take a job here? Natalie rolled her eyes. Research, she explained patiently. Actors are always going undercover to explore some new role, and they come to the Northwest all the time. My Hollywood education started with Natalie. Since my family doesn't own a TV, when Natalie saw my pop culture ineptitude the year I went to Quanisum High School, she instituted Media Night. It had cured me of saying homeschoolish things like, "What's American Idol?" and depleting her social points. At the Darkstalkers console, Devon leaned toward the screen where a nearly topless succubus was fighting a pharaoh in a giant headdress. I shifted my body away from him. Couldn't Natalie just finish her fries? "You should totally let me do your makeup." Natalie opened her bag. I shook my head. My face wouldn't know what to do with makeup. She rummaged in her lipsticks and brushes. "Just maybe a little bronzer? I could so bring out your cheekbones." It would be so completely Natalie to try to make me over and then present me to Devin like her 4-H project. I shook my head again. They test that stuff on defenseless bunnies. Doesn't that bother you? Had I heard him turn? Was he staring at my back? Natalie poked at my books. What did you get? She scrutinized the top title with one of her upside-down smiles. The Complete Poems of John Donne? You're hopeless, Brigida. She offered me a fry. Donne was the greatest of the metaphysical poets. Ooh, how exciting! She touched the second book. And what's that? Sound the Shofar? A High Holy Days handbook? You're going Jewish now? Mom and Dad have a kosher group staying with us at the center. They're biking for a sustainable planet. We're one of their stops. Wasn't it the alien abduction victims last weekend? Why weren't you studying them? Abductees, and I don't consider them a religion. For Natalie, religion is something that runs in your family, or not. If I asked her whether she likes being Jewish, she'd say it was the same as asking whether she likes having brown eyes. I can't talk to her about how I want the great cosmic mystery to let me climb on its back. I slid the books into my lap before Natalie could look closer. Fortunately, she hadn't noticed the item folded between them, the literary equivalent of fried pork rinds. Poetry and religion were not enough to redeem it, and I'd die if Devin saw it. You can't just become Jewish, Brigida. Natalie licked some ketchup off her thumb. You have to be either born Jewish or convert. I took another French fry. I hope they weren't cooked in animal fat. I'm only reading up, okay? Whatever, said Natalie. I like it better than your Baptist phase. She peered over my head. He's still here, she sing-songed. What's he doing? I whispered, hating myself for giving in. Natalie patted my hand. Sweet Brigida. She stood up. You'll just have to turn around, won't you? She wiggled her eyebrows. Do you want some ice cream? I shook my head. Natalie headed for Josh Hutcherson. I would so not turn around. Devin's parents stopped homeschooling him and stuck him in the Quinisom High School in 9th grade because it had a chess club. A chess club. Why my parents decided Quinisom High School was a good idea after they'd carefully cultivated counterculture children, I'll never know. Mallory begged to go when she was a freshman and stayed through graduation. I lasted, barely, through one awe-inspiring year. Then I went back to the woods. In September, Devin was back at KHS and I wasn't. In October, he quit chess club. And as fall moved into winter, we were, I think, a couple. On Valentine's Day, he gave me a card, but it didn't say I love you or anything. It didn't even have hearts on it. It had a picture of Arthur Schopenhauer with a quote that said, "Religion is the masterpiece of the art of animal training." He never did get around to kissing me. I shifted ever so slightly in my chair. Did his head whip back to the screen? I peeked furtively. The pharaoh turned the succubus into a mummy. Had Devin fumbled the joystick? I had a rush of sympathy. I could make it easier on him. I could walk over there, I'd smile, and in that smile would be divine forgiveness. He wouldn't have to speak. He'd take my hand and... Devin's cell phone rang. Hey! His face broke into a grin. Nothing much. He laughed, a goofy, un-Devin-like laugh, and leaned back in his seat. Beneath the pharaoh flashed the words, "You misbegotten spawn of a jackal, crawl back in your hole." I've got all the time in the world, said Devin, for you. Thoughts of saintliness vanished. Natalie zipped over with a bowl of cherry Garcia. I gave Josh my phone number. She shivered. God, he's beautiful. I have a good feeling about this. Devin closed the phone like he'd just been named Beefcake of the Year. Natalie glanced at him. So, she said, still flushed with her own victory, why are you still huddled over your books, Brigida? Before I could run, she was beside him. Devin, she trilled. Guess who's here? There was no way to hide. Brigida Schopenhauer, he said, as if I was a distant acquaintance. Hey, I felt wobbly. Did I have big wet spots under my arms? Why did I care? Devin slid his phone into his pocket. I meant to come by, he said. Was that, just maybe, regret in his eyes? Natalie seized her matchmaking opportunity. You should come by. Tonight. We're getting together in the treehouse, and you haven't been in forever. His irises had little gold flecks in them. He'd said he meant to come by. Coming by had meaning for him. It meant... I left my jacket the last time, he said. I imagined strangling him with said jacket. There'll be pizza, said Natalie, while I stood there like an idiot. Okay, said Devin. He looked caught. He pulled on his hoodie. See you around, He beat it fast out the door. Huh, Natalie frowned. Don't worry, Brigitte. He's just nervous around you. It's obvious he still likes you. We just need to... I didn't stick around to hear what we needed to do. I made for the cave in the back. No one played the 80s games. Space Invaders faced the wall, making a phone booth-sized hidey hole. I threw myself in. I landed hard in someone's lap. Hey, he yelled. I jumped off him as my books hit his feet and his third life dematerialized on the screen. He sprang up, his hands and fists. What the hell? Clearly, I'd invaded his space. He looked a little older than me, dark hair, scowling eyebrows, and better looking than I wanted to notice. Maybe I could dematerialize. He bent and began gathering my books. He smelled good. He had very broad shoulders. He handed me the Dun, the Jewish festivals. Too late, I dove for the floor. I groped for the rest in a last-ditch attempt to save my dignity, but it was useless. The boy reached under the console and retrieved the last item. The National Enquirer flopped open to shout, Pamela's new boy toy needs penis implants. He slapped it on my stack with an expression of pure disgust. He offered me a hand, but I ignored it. Fake gallantry I could do without. I straightened as loftily as possible and pitched the Enquirer into a garbage can. The boy's scorn melted into amusement. Who are you? Never mind, I said, as Natalie sailed in, calling, Brigitte! She stopped as soon as she saw him. God, she said, you look just like Trent Eve. Maybe a hole would open up in the floor. The boy shoved his hands in his pockets. I'm Luke, he said. Did you see Trent in Rocket? Natalie babbled. He should win a Golden Globe, I think. I don't follow movies, said Luke. Really? Natalie flashed her pearly whites at him. What are you into? Music? Football? He smirked and looked at me. Tabloids, he said. Love those tabloids. I wanted to brain him with my Dun. He glanced at the clock. I have to go, he said. He edged past the still chattering Natalie. I squeezed my books tight so my arms wouldn't shake. Natalie didn't notice. What was that about? She said when he was gone. Let's just leave. I scanned the tables for my purse. Mom wanted me home. Mallory was coming back from college so she could help us with the center for the rest of the summer. He's so hot, said Natalie. God, those muscles and the long lashes. Didn't you think he looked like Trent Eve? I shrugged. Trent Eve was definitely not a star I kept track of. What is wrong with you? Said Natalie. Did you look at that face? That gorgeous, gorgeous face? I had looked at that face, and it had looked back at me and seen, what? Poet and violinist Brigitte? Seeker after truth Brigitte? Brigitte who knows the origins of hundreds of words? No, he'd seen vapid Brigitte, easily entertained Brigitte, sellout Brigitte. Okay. So, let's hear about yours.
I have got to learn how to write romance, clearly, or not romance. So, my name is Edward Averett. I am a writer since age 11. Actually, there was someone at the reading at the UW bookstore on Monday night who I had been in 7th grade with down in Kelso, Washington. And she had been my reader when I was writing novels in 7th grade. And we haven't seen each other for 44 years. So that was pretty exciting, actually. But I've had day jobs all the way through. So it wasn't until probably about 10 years ago that I became very serious, more serious about writing fiction. I had a friend who happened to have published a very successful young adult book called Stuck in Neutral, which won a Prins Honor book. And he asked me to come with him, or invited me to come along to New York with him one time when he was going, and I met his agent. I had a manuscript which had previously been an adult manuscript, which I reworked in the 6 weeks I was waiting to go to New York, into more or less a young adult novel. And the agent liked it. I was very lucky within the first couple of months that it landed at Clarion Books, which is a Houghton Mifflin imprint, with a brand new editor there who was very, very tall, and she had played high school girls basketball, which was the subject of The Rhyming Season, which was my first YA novel. And I've been writing since then. This book, Cameron and the Girls, just came out in April. And it's taken probably 4 years from idea to finished product to get this on the shelves. It's the story of a 14-year-old boy, Cameron Galloway, who has a subset of schizophrenia called schizophreniform disorder, and it's distinguished from, I was going to say normal schizophrenic, but that doesn't fly. But it's distinguished from schizophrenia in that the intensity is not as strong usually. It lasts anywhere from 1 month to 6 months, which is a pretty short duration actually for any sort of schizophrenic episode. And also I think I chose schizophreniform because when you're writing for young adults, there needs to be a modicum of hope in there for the reader and for the character himself. So this boy had a relatively normal childhood up until age 12 or so, and he had an episode of schizophreniform disorder where he was hearing voices, was isolating himself, and generally showing some of those signs that are hallmarks of schizophrenia. It sets him apart from the other kids around him. He is ultimately placed in a special program at school called the Emotionally Disturbed Program. He does not feel normal anymore, doesn't know if he will ever be able to feel normal again, and sort of struggles with that. He really struggles with, what the rest of his life is going to be, and that's pretty normal for any adolescent. I mean, but on top of the normal adolescent struggles, you have this disease, which is pretty serious, makes for a very difficult time for teenagers. He is put on Risperdal, which is a medication used for schizophrenia. He does pretty well, but Risperdal makes him feel abnormal as well, in a sense that none of the other kids are doing this, and he has to take it or things happen. So sometimes he stands at the end of the hall and watches the regular students go down the hall, and he longs to be in among those kids. So one of the things he decides to do is to stop taking his medication. And what generally happens after a period of time when he stops taking his medication is that he starts to hear, there is one voice that he always hears, and he calls it the professor. And this voice is kind of an educator for him, a guide of, a mentor in some ways for him. So he doesn't mind that person. But as the story opens, soon into the story, another voice comes to him, and it's a voice of a young girl, of a teenage girl that he's never heard before. He's never heard a female voice before. He decides he really likes the voice. He eventually develops a relationship with this girl, and in fact falls in love with this voice in his head, which is part of the dramatic reach of the story. Meanwhile, in his class at school, there is a girl who is new. Her name is Nina. She's a bit of a clinically depressed person, and she likes Cameron as well. So what the story develops into is kind of a love triangle among Cameron, Nina in his class, and a girl who resides in his head. And I think the story really talks about who's in charge of their life, and teenagers have that question, whether they're ill or sane or anything. All teenagers have that sort of question. When it comes down to it, who's in control of my life? And in Washington State, for your mental health care, You just have to be 13 years old in order to be able to make your own mental health decisions, as long as you're not a danger to yourself or others. So this story is how Cameron comes to grips with his disease and is able in some way to forge an existence as a teenager in this day and age. So that's what it's about. You can ask questions at any time that you want to. I have a couple of things that I do want to read, if you want me to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear it.
This is a section where what's happened up to this point is that he has actually heard the voice of the girl, and she says, "Hello, Cam," or "Hi, Cam," all the time. In fact, the title of this book was going to be at one point, "Hello in There," because that's originally what she always said when she made her appearance, was "Hello in There." Actually, the original title of this book was going to be "The Boy Who Sat on Eggs," because that was one of the things that he did that defined him with this disorder. And the publisher agreed to accept the novel as long as I got rid of every possible egg metaphor. So no more "The Boy Who Sat on Eggs." Anyway, we're on chapter 4 here. I told you not to ask me any unanswerable questions. It took a while because at first I had to grind all the enamel off my teeth at the suggestion that it wasn't the perfect novel that I thought it was in the beginning. It took me a fair amount of time, which may explain why it took so long to get published. Okay. I wake up warm because the vent in the wall in my room is throwing out heat in waves. It is still dark and I can hear soft rain against the window. I would like to snuggle down and go back to sleep, but I feel tense. I stretch the muscles in my back and legs until they hurt. Physical pain sometimes postpones the mental. But one thing I have learned is that the mental always comes. First there is a stab somewhere in my mind, as if somebody were slitting my thinking with a sharp knife. With my eyes closed, I can actually visualize words bisecting and falling away. So with the word goodness, the good says goodbye to the ness. But it's hard to tolerate this progression of weirdness for very long, so I slide out of bed and get dressed. There are secret ways to get out of the house without my parents' knowledge. The best one is the living room near the fireplace. It's a built-in wood box that connects through the wall to the wide front porch. On the other side is a box that looks the same. Someone on the porch can throw fireplace logs into the box, and they will roll inside where someone else can lift them out and throw them into the fire. Since it's late in the season, the wood box is nearly empty. I squeeze down into this coffin and then wriggle across to the other side. Like a vampire, I crawl out and stand shivering on the porch. It is dark all around except for the headlights of a lone car way down on the highway near the bus stop. I love this time all by myself. No one to watch me shake the way I am shaking now. The tension pushes me off the porch. I stand on the grass. The rain is coming down even harder, and I soak it up. Behind me, the ghostly light of day is starting to creep over the hills, but it is still too dark to see well. I turn around and around, making myself dizzy. On about my 10th turn, I hear this. "Hello, Cam." I turn my head sharply. My heartbeat picks up. "Who?" I whisper hoarsely. "It's me." "But who are you?" I hear a faint giggle. "You are so funny. You know who I am." "I'm funny?" I don't even feel the rain now, even though it has soaked through me. "It's one of the things I like about you." "You like me?" I say. No girl except for Beth, my sister, has ever said anything like that. I am tingling now. "Of course I do." I stick out my tongue and lap at the raindrops like a dog at a water bowl. What else do you like about me, I ask. Well, I like that you're a thinker, that you're not always out throwing baseballs or footballs or spitting on the sidewalk. Sometimes I like to throw a football, I say, but it's not your whole life, Cameron. You're more than just one thing. You speak like a much older person. You read up on interesting subjects like psychology. In fact, you're sort of like a Renaissance man. This could possibly be the best moment of my entire life. But the front porch light suddenly snaps on and the door is yanked open. My mom is standing there cinching her robe. I'm not doing anything, I quickly say. She stands quietly, looking old and tired in this moment of silence. I do that to people. If I laid out all the moments of silence I have created for others in my life, they would make a whole long, quiet life of their own. My mom finally says, "This can't be happening again." I walk up to the porch and stand in front of her. I've let her down one more time. I can see it in her eyes. It's not what I want to do. I'm sorry, Mom, I say. She steps inside. Go in and change out of those. Okay, I say in my obedient voice. But as I pass her, she adds, we're going to have to talk about this, Cam. Back in my room, I tear off my clothes, dry myself, and slip down under the covers. I shiver until I hear her mount the stairs. Soon I can feel her in the doorway. I project out my force field to keep her from saying anything or getting too close. She sighs as she picks up my sloppy, wet clothes. Maybe there are some things she doesn't want to know for sure because she doesn't come in any farther. When she's gone, my mind considers what's just happened. With voices, it's a crapshoot. You can't always control what you get, but I've never felt this way from just hearing one of them, as if my blood were juicier than normal. I don't know what her name is, but I think I'll call her the girl. In spite of the warm air spilling out of the vent, I'm too psyched to fall back to sleep, and I eventually get up to get ready for school. Good, huh? Well, let's have a little applause. Thank you, thank you. It's so spontaneous of you. So what do we want to talk about? Let's not talk about that. No.
He doesn't want to talk about anything good.
This idea, well, when I first started working in mental health, which I've been in, did I say that, for 35 years, I worked with a fair amount of schizophrenic people because at the Community Mental Health Center, where I believe you worked, young lady, at one point in Spokane, we had a half a day a week where we took whoever came in the door, and we had to be good at diagnosis and making decisions on disposition of cases. And a fair amount of the people who came in did have significant psychotic disorders. So I had that idea before when I thought about these people. But the one thing I don't talk about very much is I did have a member of my family, speaking of the egg metaphors, who would take some of the eggs that were used for breakfast, take the ends of the shells, paste them together, put them into a nest, and sit on them for a while, fully expecting that they would hatch into something. So Cameron originally sort of came from that notion. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable exposing that person at this point. Yes, ma'am. Is that a what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Sitting on the eggs, is it a metaphor for you?
Actually, this book started out as this, I thought, as I said earlier, was just the greatest book ever written. And I really took the egg metaphor to its fullest extent. There were 21 chapters, which is the amount of days it takes for a chick to develop within an egg, and each chapter was a development in Cameron's life, and I just thought that was the greatest thing. And you know, when editors look at you, or even your agent looks at you and says, "Are you crazy? Are you nuts? Do you really think?" I said, well, that's ironic, given the subject matter here, asking me if I'm nuts. But, what was the question? No, I can't say who it was. Yes, ma'am.
What is your favorite chapter in the book?
Wow, that is a brilliant question. You must come from brilliant stock. My favorite chapter in the book. Well, I don't want to give away what happens, but it's there. There's an episode where he has to walk across a railroad bridge and a train is coming, and I liked writing that chapter. It was very exciting. Yes.
This is a question for both of you. As young adult writers, how much do you draw on your own childhood experience? Just in the sense of, I'm a teenager, and I have found that sometimes I forget what it's like to be a young adult. And so, as you're writing it, how much of it do you kind of go back into your own childhood, or is it more kind of the like cultural threads that we kind of know that a lot of teenagers go through? What's that process like for you guys?
Go ahead.
I think for me, I draw on my whole life, all the way to adulthood, because I think, at the most basic level, teenagers aren't any different from us. We have the same, we all have insecurity, and we all have loss, and so I think that one of the things I pulled from in this book was my loss of my own grandmother, which happened when I was 36. So I was able to sort of translate that down to being a teenager, dealing with that. But I think there were things, they're kind of the typical things, like feeling like an oddball as a teenager, and that constant quest for truth definitely has always been me. So I guess I didn't try to focus on a particular age. I used to, when I was writing, try to go back through my teenage diaries and see if I could pull stuff, and it was just embarrassing. I didn't want to write about that person. She just embarrassed me. So I think instead I sort of project myself into, if this were me and I was 16 years old, how would it be to be in this situation? And I kind of I let that character inhabit me, and then I just see what they do. So, yeah. How about you?
I've got to learn to keep a diary as well.
Oh, it's just embarrassing.
Is it? Yeah. I'm sometimes embarrassed at my childhood, too. I think that I've always been, since my adolescence, a bit of an anti-authoritarian in my mind. And if there were rules to break, I always admired the people who broke those rules, and because I wanted to so bad, but I was a 4-point student and was supposed to be really good at everything and good all the way around. And people like my cousins and stuff who could act out, I was always in admiration of. Not that you ever did, Carol, at all, but so it's not hard for me to inhabit the mind of a 14-year-old. It's not hard for me even to inhabit the schizophrenic mind of a 14-year-old. I just seem to ease right into it, and it's not the hard part. The hard part for me is writing adults. Yeah.
I think maybe me too. That's kind of interesting, because I've written some fiction for adults, and I'm sure I will do more in the future, but I feel pretty comfortable in that teenage. I wonder though, for you, you're able to write a schizophrenic character with ease, but I wonder if it's because being in mental health, it's not strange to you. And I think that folks with serious mental disorders, we kind of separate from them. Like, this is an alien, this is a person from another planet, I'm afraid of this person. And that's not true for you. You're not afraid of them. They're just, a person that you're talking to, that's coming to you for help, that you maybe, develop friendships
Right.
with that person.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of them. I used to be afraid of them when I first started, because maybe that is true about the general population. You
Think
kind of
it
have a stand-back attitude about that sort of thing. But while I was doing some research for this book, I discovered some interesting things, one of which said that in this survey they did in the Netherlands, 20% of the responders said that they had heard voices at least once in their life. I thought it had to do with Amsterdam, of course, but maybe not. Maybe not. And since then, I've read a couple of others in different countries where people admit to having heard a voice at least once in their life. That wasn't the voice we all have in our head. The conversations we have didn't originate on the outside. But a lot of them talked about that it was a loved one that they had lost, and that they had always wanted to hear one more time that voice. And for some reason, at some point along the way, they actually did hear that. So maybe it's not as unusual as we
Do you think
it
the
is.
voices, do you think for folks who hear voices and who have disorders where they hear voices, are those voices sometimes beneficial? I mean, is it a sacrifice for them to let go of the voices? Is the goal always to let go of the voices?
Thank you for asking that. Do you watch TED Talks? Any folks watch those TED Talks? There was one on, I think, TED Britain, in Great Britain, where there was a young woman who talked about her difficult adolescence growing up with a schizophrenic diagnosis, and that she had these voices which were just horrible, ominous voices that she struggled with all the time. She was on medication. She tried to kill herself. She was hospitalized a good many times. And finally, before giving up, decided that she might try to make friends with her voices, which is sort of an unprecedented idea, I think. And I think in the general public's mind, too, it would be an unprecedented thing to want to have some sort of relationship with this thing going on in your head. And she said she was able to do that, and it calmed her down so much that even though she still took some medications, she decided to go get a degree, of course, in clinical psychology, and that even that she still continued to hear some of the voices, and she had a voice that gave her the correct answers on the tests that she took in her clinical psych class. So there is an advantage, maybe. I don't know. A little far out there, but you should watch that. It's really an elegant talk by a woman who was obviously very, very ill, and she states that there is an organization now whose purpose is to help schizophrenic people make peace in some way with the voices in their head, and that can become helpful for them in living their lives. So.
I've actually heard that with dissociative disorder, that, folks that decide they don't want to integrate all those personalities, they just want to have them cooperate with one another, and that's the goal, that, integrating them is a loss.
I would imagine it's like herding cats, though, with all those all those personalities.
I don't know. I think I've got a friend that's had some success with that. But
Okay.
Yeah. I'm interested in hearing a passage where you've got both the girls in the same scene. Is there?
There is sort of one. They're not aware that they're both there.
But Cameron is.
Cameron is. Okay, go ahead and start talking. I'll look.
Oh, okay. I'll talk. Well, any questions about any of this? The Summer of No Regrets.
What inspired you for the Summer of No Regrets?
I'm trying to remember what did, and I'm not even really. Well, yeah, I know one thing that did. All the religion stuff, anyway. I mean, it's a book that has so many different aspects to it. The searching for a religion is only one thing, but we used to have a group at our house. It was maybe 10 years ago or so. Was it 10 years ago? My husband's sitting over there. I think it was. That we called Antelak, and it was an experiment. We had when I sent out the invite, it was, can Christians and Buddhists and pagans and Jews and Hindus all get together and talk about the divine without anyone being burned at the stake. And so we had people from all these interesting spiritual backgrounds, and the rules were no spiritual one-upmanship, no proselytizing, everyone gets a chance to talk, spirituality is not off limits. So we just kind of go around and share, well, how's your month been going? And spirituality was something that, could be part of that. And we kind of learned each other's languages. And I think my husband and I were the token Christians. It was mostly neo-pagans. And we had a Buddhist, and we had a Muslim family come one time. And, so it was great because we learned to speak each other's languages and to find the commonalities, more and more and more and more commonalities. By about year 3, I was ready to start looking at, well, what are the differences? How are we different? Because then it wasn't, you're different and your way is wrong. It was, we have all these things in common, so what are the various ways that we approach things that really are different? So that was really cool. So I think that a lot of that aspect of the book came from that experience. Yeah. For Brigida, there was, I don't know. I wrote for children's magazines for a really long time, still do sometimes. And, there's a point where you kind of run out of names. So the names begin getting more and more unusual. There was a girl named Gita that I went to high school with, and I think her full name was Brigida, and she went by Gita, and this Brigida, her family calls her Gita, and I kind of liked that. And then I had a friend whose mother-in-law was named Brigida. So for some reason, it just came to me and seemed, I don't know, I kind of liked it. And then I was like, well, then that's sort of a German name, so I need to give her a German last name, and I don't know how I came up with Schopenhauer. I guess I haven't even really read any Schopenhauer, but I think he's kind of depressing. So it seemed like that would be kind of a fun thing to give her the name of this sort of sober German philosopher. And yeah, so that's where Brigida came from. Did you find the passage?
I did.
Let's hear it.
This is a point further in the book where Cameron has run out of his class at school, and he's gone. Nina, who is the girl in his class who he likes, is not there at school that day. So he runs out at some point and runs to her house, because he's been there before, to see what's up with her. The thing about that, one difficult part about writing this book was, since there are different voices, I had to figure out a way to get them on the page and be distinctive. So I came up with different fonts for different voices. But when I read it, sometimes it might be a little difficult to figure out who's saying what. So I'll try to be a little different for each voice. Not that I'm hearing those voices or anything, but I don't mess around. He's at her house now. I don't mess around. I push on the unlocked door. The kitchen is in worse shape than it was the first time I was there. More dishes are stacked in the sink. Little tumbleweeds of hairy dust litter on the floor. The cat snoozes in a blue plastic basket half full of dirty clothes. It opens one eye and meows. Nina, I say. I set down the bag of snacks and my shirt, but don't stay long in the kitchen. I walk straight to where I found her before and see her on the bed again. This time I put a knee on the bed and grab her foot, shaking it. Nina? No jumping up and screaming this time. As I watch, one of her eyes pops open and focuses on me. Took you long enough, she whispers. You okay? No, she quickly replies. But what else is new? She raises herself up and I can see that she has her clothes on. She notices me gawking and says, I saw you coming. I watch her get out of the bed. She runs both hands through her hair and then stretches. Mrs. Owens had me out in the hall and wanted me to go see Mrs. Roosevelt, the nurse. Why? Because I'm independent now and she can't handle it. So you ran away from school and you're wearing no shirt? Wow, Cam. She puts her hand on my chest, drums her fingers, then plays with her hair again. I feel goosebumps all over my body. It's what happens when you take control of your life, I say. What does your mom think? She doesn't like it, but she has to live with it because it's the law. I narrow my eyes. I thought you were depressed today, I say. I was until I saw you. A shiver goes through my body and takes a place very near my heart. You mean that? She nods and stretches again, then plops down on the end of the bed. I look at her bare feet. Then I hear, "Hello, Cam." Oh, hello, at last. I love you. I love you so much, I say without thinking. It's real and so automatic. Then I wake up to the voice. You don't know how much, I add. Nina bunches up her face. Really? I've missed you. I feel my body hum. Oh, I've missed you too. How cool, says Nina. I can't get you out of my mind. Nina turns into something different. She stretches out her legs, and they're like beasts. Her toes curl and uncurl. Her head bends to the side. Crisp red spots dot her cheeks. I'm so surprised, she says. I was so worried I'd never speak to you again. I know there is no greater love than what you and I have. I've been waiting so long to talk to you again. Let's talk then, I say. I've been waiting too. I spiral down to the floor and lean against Nina's bookcase. I no longer feel a chill. I hold my knees and press my bare chest against them. I'm so happy I feel like crying. What should we talk about? Nina says. What? I said, what do you want to talk about? You're just the boy I need. I get so lonely, Cam, and there's no one else I can talk to the way I can talk to you. Okay, let's talk about everything we want to. I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to lose you again. Nina smiles as if she were made of sugar. I didn't know you felt this way, she says. I mean, I hoped you felt this way, but I wasn't sure and I didn't want to push it. She leans in closer to me. My eyes finally focus on her, but then briefly turn inward before they clear again. And I'll try so hard not to scare you off, she says. I promise. I close my eyes and my lips pucker just the slightest. I suddenly feel another presence. Something is getting closer. I can sense warmth next to my lips. Then there's another voice. The other guy, he's called. Wake up, Cammy. You don't want to miss this. Be quiet, I whisper. Knock, knock, fool. Your manhood is waiting. I blast open my eyes, and there is Nina, her face so close I see her everywhere. I feel her lips against mine. It makes my head whirl with pleasure. I guess that was pretty good, huh, she says, leaning back. I close my eyes again. The girl says, where were we? We have all the time in the world, I say, you and I forever. Do you think anyone else feels this way, Nina says. Not one, I say. There's nobody else in the world.
That's fantastic. Poor Nina.
Poor Nina, that's what I think. If she only knew, which, by the way, she does at some point.
Okay, I have another question. So, how did you guys find yourself writing? I mean, I know that you had started writing at 11, and I know that you have an extensive background, but what was that moment where you knew that if you didn't write, that would be, like, there was really no other option?
Oh, that's an interesting way to phrase it. I've never had that question phrased just that way, because I think when I knew that I wanted to be a writer was second grade, and I remember writing a poem and having it put up in the hall, and so that was at the point at which I started identifying myself as a writer. I'd been reading Beverly Cleary, Ramona the Pest, Henry Huggins, Beezus and Ramona, all those, the ones that were written in the 60s and 70s, and she wrote more and more and more. So do you read Beverly Cleary? Well, it was the first time I realized there's somebody in charge of writing those books where that's their job. And I thought, well, somebody that's got a job to write the book, that's what I want to do. So second grade, I decided to be both a writer and a teacher. And I'm going to take this question, and then I'll answer the other part of yours. Yes.
I want to be a writer too. And I
Awesome.
like to tell stories, and I like to read.
It is very fun. And, I have a secret for you, and that is that you're probably a writer already. It probably isn't a someday thing for you. Are you already writing things down where you like the sounds of the words and you like the stories? Then you're already a writer. So the question is, what are you going to do with the writing? Are you going to keep doing it? And are you going to be sharing it with other people? And are you going to make it into books that lots of people can read? Are you going to maybe have your mom help you start a blog or something where you could put your stories? I mean, there are a lot of things you can do right now as a writer. And the most important thing is to read and read and read and write and write and write. So, yeah, you're a writer already. Because that's when I started. And it's always been a great joy for me. It's the point where I realized that I had to write. I think I always kept a journal from about third grade. And so if I wasn't, I always figured my world out by writing. And by writing, by middle and high school, I was writing very bad poetry and short stories and all kinds of things like that. And so it was part of my identity. I am a writer. I think the point where I realized this is what I need to do as sort of my vocation was sometime in my late 20s, when I started, because I already was a teacher. There were two things I wanted to be. One was a teacher and one was a writer. So I was already a teacher. And I started going to writing conferences, and then I started taking it on as, I think I found a group of friends that wrote that were, I became very close with then and still am. And so those became my tribe. And then I just felt like I really can't not write. I'm not a very happy person when I'm not writing. So my family can attest to that. So that probably happened sometime in my late 20s. Yeah. How about you?
I've got to learn to do a journal.
You'll love it. And you'll be embarrassed, but, do it anyway. Read Natalie Goldberg, Writing Down the Bones, and Julia Cameron's...
I have that book.
Yeah, read Writing Down the Bones, and then read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Those will get you journaling, yeah.
Okay. Writing is like a medication for me. If I haven't written for a while, I get visibly nervous. I get visibly shaky and uncentered, and so in 1981, we moved to Spain, and so I was looking for something to do, and I was going to write, and write the great American novel and live in this small Spanish village. And I really got a discipline about writing, and I wrote every morning, every day, and wrote quite a few novels, unsellable novels as they turned out to be. But nevertheless, I developed a discipline. And after I got that discipline going, that's when I really started to notice what I was like if I wasn't writing. And I think dear Maria back there can attest to the fact, just as you say, that she knows immediately when I haven't been writing for a while. And it's almost like she goes to the medicine cabinet. She'll say, go to your room, sit down, and write a little bit. And so it's very... I'm not a particularly spiritual person, but it's a very spiritual exercise for me to do that. And it involves and consumes my whole self. So I really like that. Yes. Someone who lives in Spain? Done. Done. It'll be done next week. I'll send it to you. Okay.
Okay, I have one last question. I'm full of questions. What is next for you guys as writers as you're walking along this path?
Well, I'm working on 2 novels right now. One is about a girl whose mother is a best-selling author, and her mother becomes ill with what the girl doesn't know. Obviously, there's something mentally going on, and she becomes unable to write her books. And by then, the girl has taken over her mom's affairs and correspondence. And when it comes time for mom to turn in the book contract, and the girl has looked at the book and sees that it's pretty much nonsensical, she sends in her own book set in her mother's story world under her mother's name. And that becomes the most popular book in the series. So the girl is trying to keep the secret that she's written this book while she's wildly excited about it, while her mother is continuing to decline. And then kind of out of nowhere, she gets a tweet from someone saying, "I know what's going on." So that's what I'm writing right now. I'm also writing a novel in verse, and it's about a girl who lives in Seattle and works at the Seattle Art Museum. Her father suffers from bipolar disorder that's untreated and threatens to kill himself frequently, and her job is to talk him out of it. And then one night at the art museum, one of the paintings kind of comes to life. She steps into it and ends up in the time of the Impressionists. So that's what I'm working on, the other thing I'm working on.
Well, if you're working on that, I'm going to write something more romantic.
I think you should. Yeah, I think you should write about a guy who wonders if the girl next door is
An actress
a hot teen
living
actress.
and hiding.
Yeah, and through that he discovers
Okay.
his more spiritual side.
I just got that
which
idea
he feels
tonight.
he's been dismissing all this time, because he's been so much of an intellectual and tried to explain everything through psychology. Oh my gosh, the sister in this book is a psychology major at UC Berkeley and knows everything. I'm going to have to find a little section to read of her because it's pretty fun.
I thought that was a romance.
Yeah, it's a romance. It's just a romance.
I am also working on 2 novels. I have a manuscript, first draft, with my editor right now, which is called, I just renamed it this moment, called The Boy Who Could Have Been. And it was previously called Boy Unknown. And the epigraph is, "There once was a lonely healer." And it's the story of, again, a 14-year-old boy who can cure people of their diseases by reading to them. So they're having a little problem with this story, trying to figure out where it fits. But that's the problem with the business manager at the publishing house. But it is essentially the story of a young man who discovers early on, by reading to the dog who is sick and the dog gets well, he reads Pippi Longstocking to the field mice, and they're no longer have any hantavirus or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it is a story, the development of this kid and this power that he seems to have that comes from who knows where, and eventually you realize that it's actually kind of a novel within a novel, which may be part of the problem with it. The other book I'm working on is called Drawn to You, and it's about a girl who has lost her twin to a murder up in the Leschi neighborhood in Seattle, and her depression and how people are trying to cope with that. And she gets sent to this beach town to work in this nursing home, and an oracle shows up in the town, and it goes on and on from there. I'm not quite finished with that yet, but
Ooh, an oracle. See, you've got this spirituality thing going on all over the place.
yeah, you would think so,
Yeah,
but it's in
it's
writing
sort of like-
only. I am not a spiritual person.
You keep saying that. Yeah, I believe you. I know. You keep that spirituality away. You just
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to read the Mallory section because it's just too funny. Dad finally appeared at dinner, tired and mossy. The feathers in his hair had wilted. Mallory pressed her lips together when she saw him. She yanked the vegetables and goat cheese out of the oven while I cut greens from the indoor garden. We grow most of our food. It's an Earthship thing. Mom ran her hands up Dad's arms, and he half smiled, hugging her close. Mom likes this new spiritual version of Dad better than the skeptical one we grew up with. You smell like cedar, she said. Mallory cleared her throat. If we're done sniffing each other, we can eat. Dad tied his hair back and washed his hands. He hung his drum in the window distractedly before sitting down. Mom stroked his arm. How was it? Disturbed. He salted his potatoes. Bear spoke to me yesterday, but now a lot of confusion. Killing cougar like that. Dad shook his head. The energy field is contaminated. He didn't look at me. Did he think this contamination was my fault? Mallory got one of her indulgent looks. She used to save them for me, but now Dad was fair game. Mom divided a piece of bread. Could you do a morning ritual? Dad gazed out at the bench by Mom's garden. I could. He nodded slowly. Near the western edge. Mom dipped her bread in olive oil. What's there? I don't know. Something forceful. Strong magic. Dad swirled the wine in his glass as if he was reading tea leaves. My mouth went dry. A pair of golden eyes flashed into my thoughts. An open maw, teeth like knives. The cougar's ghost? Was she angry? Mallory propped her elbows on the table. I find this fascinating, she said. Mom sighed. I'll bet you do. Mallory straightened. Well, no offense, Dad, but animal spirits? This isn't reality. Dad used to talk a lot about reality, especially to explain how far out of it Nani and Opa were. They'd gone to one of those churches where the people spoke in tongues and fell on the floor. I used to go with them, and it wasn't so bad. No stranger than the people who channeled Mamda, warrior spirit. Dad sipped his wine and didn't reply, but Mallory was just warming up. This is what we call magical thinking, she pronounced. Mom pressed her lips together. Your father also has taken Psychology 101. Actually, said Mallory, we discussed this in Abnormal Psych. I wrote an entire paper on why primitive thought appeals to certain personalities. It's a kind of escape, a stress reducer. The problem is it can be debilitating. She looked at Dad significantly. Primitive thought, certain personalities, exactly what Dad used to say. It was as if he'd come back to haunt himself. My shoulders and head hurt. Couldn't Mallory leave it alone? Couldn't she see how much better Dad was doing now that he had his shaman thing? He was calmer, more relaxed. After Nani died, he'd been dangerously quiet. He'd paced a lot. When he did speak, his words were short and sharp. I'd learned to stay out of his way. Shamanism had centered him, connected him with the land, bound him to it, he said. And yet, part of me wanted to bite back the way Mallory did. The cougar had come to me, or at least to Luke. If she had a message for anybody, it wasn't Dad. And now Dad was all grief-stricken about an animal that had nearly killed me. Why did I feel as if I was disappearing? Probably because that's the way it's been since Dad started wearing feathers in the first place. Dad put his hand on Mallory's cheek. My love, there are worse things than primitive thought. She glared at him and stabbed her lettuce. By the way, Mom, I don't think Brigitte should be expected to write papers this late in the summer. It's July 1st, for God's sake. July 1st. The date surged through me like an electric charge. It's Nani's birthday, I blurted without thinking. She'd be 75. Dad looked away from me. He took another swallow of wine and resalted his potatoes. Even Mallory had nothing to say. It was as if I'd dropped a dead cat on the table. Mom put her hand on mine. That's right, she would, Gita. Nobody said anything for the rest of dinner.
This has been tons of fun.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
Any photo opportunities you want?
Yeah, we're... Oh, I have some writing and teenagery things you might want to know about. We have on Saturday out in Duval a writing conference called the Call and Response Writing Conference, a day to explore writing as a spiritual calling. We'll have Karl Marlantes, the best-selling New York Times best-selling author of Matterhorn, a novel of the Vietnam War. He'll be keynoting. He also wrote the memoir, What It Is Like to Go to War. We have Carolyn Wright, the poet, will be teaching a poetry workshop, and another half dozen other award-winning, nationally known authors. And it's by donation, and we're just raising money for St. Vincent de Paul to help needy families. So come. You can. It's helpful if you pre-register. You can grab a flyer if you want. But you can register at the door, too. And it's by donation, just, whatever you can manage. So there's that. Also, Teen Write. We're doing some novel writing workshops for teenagers in Snohomish and in July. And also, I teach them at Bellevue College. And we also have a camp for teenagers. So if you've got any teenagers in your life, we do a pretty cool overnight camp called Epic Write, which we'll be doing at Fort Casey. So the long, creepy tunnels, that echo and probably have ghosts in them. And, it's this over 100-year-old fort where we'll be doing live-action role-playing and, running around in capes and then writing stories about it. So that is the second week of July. And is there anything else? Let's see. Oh, yeah, and I also do author visits, so I've got information about that, too, if you want an author visit at your school. Oh, and then the companion book to The Summer of No Regrets has just come out. It's called Luke's Journal, and it is the story from Luke's point of view. This is actually the only paper copy of it I have, but you can get it from Amazon on Kindle and from Smashwords on ebook. So, yeah. So that's it.